Well, the Malacca Strait is arguably the world's most crucial maritime trade route, accounting for up to 40% of global seaborne trade, and is controlled by Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia. But Indonesia has proposed a toll on ships passing through, much like what Iran is attempting in the Strait of Hormuz. But Singapore is saying no. Alicia Garcia Herrero is the chief economist for Asia-Pacific Natixis. She says the move could hurt Indonesia's credibility.
So yes, indeed, this is a takeaway, in my opinion, a very wrong takeaway from the Indonesian government, and not so much because of its ultimate proposal, this tariff, because we do not know whether that's the direction in which the whole world will go. We have many other choke points. You can think of the Bosphorus, you can think of Panama. So, if everybody starts doing that, I would understand. But the problem is nobody has started yet. That's the difference. The Strait of Hormuz is literally in war. It's not comparable. That tax imposed is kind of a retaliation against what's happening. There's no retaliation here because nothing is happening. So, I do think that this was a miscalculation by the Indonesian government. The second miscalculation is that there's other actors, Singapore and Malaysia. And Singapore actually quite adamantly has refused this proposal, and so has Malaysia, in perhaps not as a strong way, but still. So therefore, I think this should have been a conversation, a closed-door conversation, and what-if conversation, certainly not like a proposal you would air, because it's a massive statement. It kind of goes counter the freedom of navigation, even without a military conflict, so worse than the Strait of Hormuz. So in that regard, I think it was a big mistake. And the Indonesian government will pay a toll in terms of credibility out of this proposal.
Of course, from Indonesia's perspective, it says a toll approach could generate significant economic value. Would that actually be the case? And could this perhaps start a conversation for a possible toll much later down the line?
So indeed, Indonesia is looking for tax income, obviously, after this massive, at least for Indonesia's fiscal situation, massive cost of the child lunch, and then, of course, the expectation of oil or gasoline subsidies, etc. So if you think about all of that, surely the Indonesian government is desperately looking for revenue. But I don't think this is a revenue that they would have managed to obtain without first the agreement of other parties, Singapore and Malaysia. And therefore, I think it's something that probably would not have solved the current, the very immediate situation of the shortfall in tax revenue for Indonesia. So in that regard, again, not a good reason, because it would not have happened immediately. It's not an Indonesia-only choke point. That's the difference. And I think, secondly, if you have already issues with your currency being too weak, if you have issues with capital outflows, that's the last thing you want, because it's very costly in terms of your reputation. So for all of those reasons, if anything, it will reduce the tax revenue that the Indonesian government may get in the light of this announcement.
Yes, of course, we've seen what's happened in the Strait of Hormuz, and in the Strait of Malacca, 40%, accounting for 40% of global trade, 45% up to of oil shipments passing through it. There would be, if a toll was put there would be sort of an inflationary impact, would there not, on quite a lot of things, as for what we are seeing in this war in Iran?
Yes, if you tell me, would a tax on goods in the Strait of Malacca, would it be inflationary? The answer would be certainly, because it's not only oil. It's a massive choke point for products beyond oil, which is not so much the case of the Strait of Hormuz. So, it's a wider impact, if you ask me. But of course, inflation out of Iran's conflict doesn't only come from the actual tax paid on container or on vessels, but on the price of oil itself. So in that regard, it would be hard to argue that the inflationary impact would be higher, because it would be a small tax on, per product. Whatever percentage would be very, very small. While for oil, it's not so much the cost of the tax, is the increase in the cost of oil. So I would say it's much ado about nothing. This is not feasible in the short run. not something I would air, and with potential retaliation. I mean, say China is probably the largest exporter through the Strait of Malacca. What are they going to say about this?
I do wonder what Beijing would make of this, but not just Beijing, but the US as well, given both the global trade superpowers, where a lot of the trade goes through the Strait of Malacca.
Not very happy. That's why I'm saying that, if this were a real proposal, it should have been aired in private conversations with the big exporters or importers, for that matter, and the other neighboring economies. So that is why the question is, why was it done? Was it just to show that Indonesia also has a choke point if needed? So was it just to show that could be real if needed? But actually not, because it's not only dependent on Indonesia, you see. So even that doesn't really show Indonesia's strength, in my view. So don't ask me why this was done. I think rather than an asset, it could become a liability, because others may actually now feel that Indonesia is more unreliable than before this statement.
Okay, Alicia Garcia Herrero, always really good to get your analysis and insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.